Today, we're doing something a little different. We are handing out a report card for India's latest education budget. Now, the education sector had a pretty clear 10-point wish list going in. So the big question is, how did the final budget actually stack up? Let's get into it.
All right, let's not bury the lead. The final grade, based on a really detailed analysis from RAYSolute consultants, is a 5.5 out of 10.
Now, a 5.5, that's a pass, right? But it's not exactly the grades you'd be taping to the fridge. It kind of suggests that, yeah, some things went well, but some really big assignments were just missed. So how on earth did we land on this very specific score?
So here's how we're going to break it all down, just like a real school report. First, we'll look at the overall scorecard. Then we'll get to the good stuff, the A+ subjects, where the budget really delivered. After that, we have to look at the failing subjects, where it fell short. Then we'll check the teachers' comments for the deeper fixes needed. And finally, we'll look ahead to the next school year.
Okay, first up, the scorecard. This is where we lay out those 10 original hopes from the education world and see what the final verdict was on each and every one.
So take a look at this. This table really tells the story. You can see 3 clear wins that got a full point each. A big push on infrastructure, getting foreign universities in, and investing in AI. Great. But then, look at the top and the middle of that list. 2 huge items scored a big, fat 0. That long-standing dream of spending 6% of GDP on education and doing more with public-private partnerships. Everything else? Well, they got partial credit, just half a point each. You add it all up, and there you have it, 5.5 out of 10.
But hey, let's start on a high note. Section 2, the A+ subjects. These are the areas where the budget absolutely knocked it out of the park.
The first big win was all about building world-class infrastructure. The sector was crying out for tangible upgrades, smart classrooms, better labs, digital access, and honestly, the budget came through. The government delivered what the source calls the hardware, and we're talking about some serious numbers here. A massive 47% funding boost to the PM-USHS scheme, a 23% jump in capital spending for top schools like the IITs and IIMs, and a major expansion of digital TV channels for education. A clear, decisive win. The second A+ subject was this big push to make India a global hub for higher education. The goal? To get top-tier foreign universities to actually set up campuses right here in the country.
And on this front, the budget triggered a major policy unlock. Think about it. Just 18 months ago, there were 0 foreign universities operating here. Now, there are 3, with big names like Deakin and Wollongong already on the ground. And get this, over 15 more have official letters of intent. That is a huge, huge shift.
But here's where things get interesting. This quote from the source report just nails it perfectly. The government delivered on visible investments. That's the hardware. But hardware without software is underutilized. And that, my friends, brings us to the problems.
And that's our cue to move into Section 3, the failing subjects. These are the big foundational gaps, the major misses that really drag that overall score down from an A to, well, a C.
And the biggest F on this report card? It's that age-old promise, increasing education spending to 6% of GDP. This isn't a new idea. It's been a national goal since the 1960s. The reality? Spending is still stuck at a measly 2.9% of GDP. In fact, education's piece of the total budget pie actually shrank a tiny bit, a complete and total miss.
The other item that got a big goose egg was the call to get serious about public-private partnerships. This was all about creating a real framework for the government and private sector to build things together.
So, what did we get? You guessed it, a whole lot of nothing. No new framework, no changes to the CSR rules to get companies to invest more, and the source points out the real irony here. 45% of Indian kids are already in private schools, but the policy just pretends that reality doesn't exist.
This chart just perfectly illustrates that hardware versus software problem, doesn't it? You can see the budget's focus was laser-beamed on the tangible stuff, the visible things like infrastructure and AI. But that foundational software, the core funding and the partnership models, got way less attention, and that creates a really lopsided policy.
All right, now for my favorite part of any report card,
the teacher's comments. This is where we go beyond that 10-point checklist and look at the deeper, game-changing reforms that the source says India needs to really start excelling.
So the first big idea is called PLI for pedagogy. It sounds a bit complicated, but the concept is actually brilliant and inspired by a successful manufacturing scheme. Put simply, instead of just giving colleges money for how many students they enroll, you give them financial rewards when their graduates actually land good jobs. It completely shifts the focus from just inputs to real-world outcomes.
The second transformative idea is a hybrid annuity model, or HAM, for schools. Here's how it would work. Private companies would build and run schools, and the government would pay them back over many years. But, and this is the crucial part, those payments would be directly tied to performance, to things like student enrollment, and most importantly, actual learning results.
And if you're wondering, does this kind of thing even work? Well, you just have to look at what the HAM model did for India's highways. It was a total game changer, completely revolutionizing how roads got built. The proposal is to take that exact same successful logic and apply it to schools. It could be the key to unlocking the private money needed to build the more than 200,000 new schools India desperately needs.
So, with all of that in our back pocket, what's the plan for the next school year? Let's look at the proposed 10-point agenda for the upcoming budget. The agenda is actually broken down into two really clear steps. Step 1 is simple. Finish the homework. That means finally dealing with the 8 items from this year's list that were either completely missed or only half done. Step 2 is to adopt new strategies by making those 2 big structural reforms a top priority.
And just to be clear, those 2 new elevated priorities are the game changers we were just talking about. First, PLI for pedagogy, to finally connect funding to student jobs, and second, the hybrid annuity model for schools, to create a powerful new engine for building the educational infrastructure of the future.
So, in the end, when you boil it all down, the report card for this budget is crystal clear, a 5.5 out of 10. We saw progress on the visible hardware, but a real failure on the foundational software. The source leaves us with this final, hanging question for policymakers. The education sector isn't just asking for money for buildings, it's asking for investment in its people. Will the next budget finally deliver?